Zax'Vorn, supreme ruler of the Plextoid Dominion and lord of the seven spiral galaxies, was having what humans might call a really, really bad day. And that was putting it mildly. "Run faster, your magnificence," wheezed Glup, his chief advisor, whose three stubby legs were pumping furiously as they sprinted down the corridor of the abandoned Earth Embassy. "I am running faster," Zax'Vorn snarled, his royal purple cape tangled around his knees. These human facilities weren't designed for beings with proper anatomical proportions. The distant sound of plasma rifles charging echoed behind them. The humans were gaining ground. "Perhaps," Glup panted, ducking under a doorway. Insulting their president to her face wasn't the most diplomatic approach. "Oh, please." Zax'Vorn rolled all four of his eyes simultaneously. How was I supposed to know they'd be so sensitive? Back home, comparing someone's skin to the underside of Krillvax's lug is practically a compliment. The truth was, Zax'Vorn had spent his entire 247-year reign believing his species was superior to all others in the universe. The Plextoid civilization had mastered faster-than-light travel while humans were still figuring out how to make fire. They had solved the unified field theory while Earth's brightest minds were debating whether the world was flat. And they had developed perfect dental hygiene while humans were still using. Zax'Vorn shuddered at the memory. String wrapped around their fingers to clean between their teeth when Earth had finally developed sufficient technology to be noticed by the intergalactic community, and the humans had sent their diplomats to establish relations, Zax'Vorn had been less than impressed. The annual diplomatic ball starts in exactly 52 Earth minutes, Glup reminded him, checking the translation device strapped to what approximated his wrist. "If we don't make it, the alliance between Earth and the other 6 members of the Galactic Council will be finalized without us. And that would be catastrophic because..." Zax'Vorn ducked as a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, leaving a smoking hole in the wall. "Because your supreme smugness," Glup hissed, showing uncharacteristic disrespect that only 143 years of friendship could permit. "Earth sits on the largest deposit of quantium in this sector. Without it, our entire economy collapses in less than a decade." Zax'Vorn groaned. Quantium, the one element his mighty civilization couldn't synthesize or find elsewhere. The frustratingly rare mineral that powered everything from their starships to their automated toenail clippers. And of course, the universe had seen fit to bury most of it beneath the feet of these primitive, emotionally volatile humans. "Fine," he conceded. "We will attend their ridiculous ball, make nice with their hysterically sensitive leaders, and secure our quantium supply. But I refuse to try their hot dogs." The name alone is barbaric. They rounded a corner and found themselves facing a dead end. The only exit was a small maintenance shaft that led outside the building. "You have got to be kidding me," Zax'Vorn muttered, staring at the tiny opening. "I am royalty. I don't crawl through dirty holes." Another plasma bolt hit the wall behind them. "You do today, Your Highness." Glup shoved him toward the shaft. Mumbling curses in 17 different alien languages, Zax'Vorn dropped to his knees and began to squeeze his regal bulk into the opening point 12 hours earlier. Things had been going, well, not great, but at least no one was shooting at them yet. The Earth Embassy on Diplomatic Row was a gaudy monstrosity by Plextoid standards. Humans had an inexplicable fondness for right angles and symmetry that Zax'Vorn found deeply unsettling. Were the elegant spiral hallways, the gravity-defying atriums, the proper number of exits for emergency evacuations, which, as it turned out, might have been useful forethought. Supreme Ruler Zax'Vorn announced the human greeter, a tall woman with short gray hair and a stern expression. "Welcome to Earth's diplomatic headquarters. I am Ambassador Chen. President Ortiz is looking forward to meeting you." "Yes, I'm sure she is," Zax'Vorn replied with thinly veiled condescension. Who wouldn't be excited to meet the ruler of the most advanced civilization in the known universe? Ambassador Chen's smile remained fixed, but a slight twitch in her left eye suggested his charm wasn't working as intended. "Indeed, if you'll follow me." They were led through a series of mind-numbingly rectangular rooms to a conference chamber where President Ortiz waited. She stood as they entered, extending a hand in the human greeting custom. "Supreme Ruler, it's an honor to finally meet you." We have heard so much about the Plextoid Dominion. Zax'Vorn reluctantly extended one of his upper appendages. Yes, well, I suppose it's somewhat interesting to meet you as well. Your species has achieved more than we expected, given your limitations. The silence that followed was, as humans might say, thick enough to cut with a knife. A very dull knife. Perhaps, President Ortiz said carefully, "You'd care to elaborate on what you mean by limitations?" Glup made a small choking sound that Zax'Vorn completely ignored. "Oh, he waved dismissively, settling his bulk into a chair that creaked alarmingly. Your abbreviated lifespans, your binary gender system, your baffling preoccupation with sports involving balls, your primitive digestive processes. Shall I continue?" President Ortiz's smile had frozen in place. "That won't be necessary." "Wonderful. Then let's discuss what really matters. Our quantium needs. We require approximately 60% of your planet's total supply. We're prepared to offer you. Let's see. Knowledge of interstellar travel? No, you have mostly figured that out. Cure for the common cold? You'd probably mess it up somehow. I know. We will give you our garbage disposal technology. It's quite revolutionary." Ambassador Chen coughed. "Supreme Ruler, Earth has already received several very generous offers from other members of the Galactic Council." "What?" Zax'Vorn's head crest inflated in surprise, a reflex he immediately regretted as he noticed the humans' expressions of disgust. What could they possibly offer that would compare to Plextoid technology? "The Arcturians have offered medical advancements that would extend human lifespan by 50 years, President Ortiz said coolly. "The Zeta Reticulans are providing clean energy solutions. The Andromedans have technology to repair our ozone layer and reverse climate change. But those are charity cases." Zax'Vorn scoffed. "Barely spacefaring civilizations themselves." President Ortiz leaned forward. "And yet, they managed to approach Earth with respect and genuine offers of mutual benefit." "Respect? For what? Your species has existed for a cosmic eye blink. You have spent most of that time killing each other over imaginary lines on your planet's surface and arguing about who has the better invisible sky friend." Glup was now making frantic, cutting motions across his throat equivalent, which Zax'Vorn studiously ignored. "The Galactic Ball is tonight," President Ortiz said, her voice dangerously calm. "All council members will be attending. I suggest you use the time until then to reconsider your approach to diplomacy with Earth." "Or what?" Zax'Vorn sneered. "Or you will find that even beings with abbreviated lifespans can make decisions with very long-lasting consequences." As it turned out, humans did not respond well to having their intelligence, appearance, customs, or planetary hygiene practices insulted. Who knew? After the disastrous meeting, Zax'Vorn had retreated to his temporary quarters in the Plextoid wing of the diplomatic complex to sulk. Glup had tried, repeatedly, to explain the concept of humility and diplomatic tact, but Zax'Vorn had dismissed these as weaknesses unbecoming of a supreme galactic ruler. "They should be grateful we even acknowledge their existence," he had declared, pacing the room while stress shedding purple scales all over the imported carpeting. "Do you know what the Plextoid Dominion was accomplishing when we were at their stage of development? We had already colonized 3 solar systems." "Yes, your magnificence," Glup had replied tiredly, "but the humans have qualities we lack. Their adaptability, creativity, and resilience are quite remarkable. And they control the quantium." "Bah, details." Then, because Zax'Vorn had the diplomatic instincts of a particularly belligerent asteroid, he had decided to take a stroll through the Earth wing to gather intelligence, which was how he had ended up overhearing a private conversation between President Ortiz and the representatives of the other Galactic Council races. "We are prepared to sign the alliance tonight," the Arcturian ambassador was saying, her translucent tentacles gesturing gracefully. "Earth will receive full protection from the Council." "What about the Plextoids?" asked the Andromedan delegate, who resembled nothing so much as an ambulatory crystal formation. "They won't take this well. The Plextoids," President Ortiz said firmly, "have made their position clear. They view Earth as a resource to be exploited, not a partner. We choose partners who respect us." Zax'Vorn had been so outraged that he'd burst into the room without thinking. "This is outrageous." You can't simply exclude the most powerful civilization in the galaxy from your pathetic little club. The silence that followed was spectacular. Supreme Ruler, President Ortiz said after a moment, "This was a private meeting. Privacy is irrelevant. I demand to know why Earth is allying with these inferior species when the Plextoid Dominion has generously offered you your garbage disposal technology?" President Ortiz suggested mildly. The other ambassadors exchanged glances. The Zeta Reticulan representative made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. And that was when Zax'Vorn, Supreme Ruler of the Plextoid Dominion and Lord of the 7 Spiral Galaxies, made an observation about President Ortiz's appearance that compared certain aspects of her facial features to parts of a Krillvax slug. In retrospect, it was perhaps not his finest diplomatic moment, which brought him to his current predicament, crawling through a filthy maintenance shaft while human. Security forces with surprisingly advanced plasma weapons pursued him through the diplomatic complex. "This is undignified," he hissed as he emerged onto the street, his once pristine robes now covered in dust and something alarmingly sticky. "Less dignity, more running," Glup advised, pointing to their escape vehicle, a small diplomatic shuttle that would take them to their ship in orbit. They sprinted across the plaza, Zax'Vorn's ceremonial headpiece slightly askew and his pride in tatters. "I don't understand," he panted as they reached the shuttle. "I have insulted thousands of species across the galaxy. None of them reacted like this. None of them had plasma rifles, Your Magnificence," Glup pointed out, slapping the door control. "Also, you have never insulted anyone who controlled something we desperately needed." As the shuttle doors closed behind them and the engines fired up, Zax'Vorn collapsed into a seat, his 4 arms crossed in a complicated knot of indignation. "So what now?" he demanded. "We just give up? Let Earth form their alliance with our inferiors and lose our quantium supply?" Glup's expression shifted to something Zax'Vorn had rarely seen before. It almost looked like cunning. "Not exactly, Your Magnificence. I took the liberty of preparing a contingency plan. We have exactly 43 Earth minutes until the diplomatic ball begins. You expect me to attend after they chase me with weapons?" "No," Glup said with newfound confidence. "I expect you to do something you have never done before." "What's that?" "Learn to apologize." Zax'Vorn stared at his advisor in shock and horror. The shuttle rose into the sky, leaving the Earth embassy behind, but carrying with it the weight of an uncomfortable new reality. For the first time in his long life, the Supreme Ruler of the Plextoid Dominion was going to have to admit he was wrong. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. "Apologize? Apologize?" Zax'Vorn's head crest inflated to twice its normal size, a physiological response that, on his home planet, sent subordinates diving for cover. The Supreme Ruler of the Plextoid Dominion does not apologize. It's literally not in our diplomatic handbook. Glup sighed and pulled out a small device that projected a holographic image of a thick tome titled The Plextoid Guide to Intergalactic Relations, 73rd edition. "Actually, Your Magnificence, it's on page 4217, under Extreme Emergency Protocols, when you have completely ruined everything. That section is purely theoretical." Zax'Vorn protested, though his crest began to deflate slightly. "Not anymore," Glup replied, with the weary patience of someone who had been managing royal tantrums for over a century. "We have 38 minutes until the ball starts. We need a plan." The shuttle was now leaving Earth's atmosphere, heading toward their orbiting flagship, the superior by every conceivable metric, named during one of Zax'Vorn's more modest phases. "Fine," Zax'Vorn grumbled, shedding scales onto the shuttle floor in agitation. "What do you suggest?" "I doubt they will even let me back into the diplomatic complex after I called their security forces bipedal waste disposal units with delusions of significance." "Actually, I think that was one of your milder insults," Glup muttered. "But we have options. Your royal wardrobe contains the ceremonial robes of contrition, never worn by any supreme ruler in our history. They have never been worn because they are hideous. All that. Beige." Zax'Vorn shuddered dramatically. "They also," Glup continued implacably, "signal to every species in the galaxy that the wearer is making a formal apology of the highest order. And if I refuse?" Glup's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. his way of expressing extreme exasperation. Then our civilization collapses due to quantum shortage. Your 247-year reign ends in disgrace, and future Plextoid history modules will feature you as a cautionary lesson in the section titled, Why Ego Shouldn't Fly the Royal Shuttle. Zax'Vorn slumped in his seat. For the first time since he'd ascended to the spiral throne at the tender age of 81, he felt something unfamiliar, self-doubt. These humans, he said quietly, they're different, aren't they? Not like the other species we have encountered. Yes, your magnificence. They are young as a spacefaring species, but they have got something rare. Superior plasma weapons. No, well yes, apparently they do have those, but I meant adaptability. They learn quickly, and they value respect over power. The shuttle docked with the flagship, and as they walked through the gleaming corridors toward the royal chambers, Zax'Vorn found himself actually thinking about President Ortiz's words. Had he really been that condescending? That arrogant? What was the human term? Douchey. Bring me the robes, he finally said, his four shoulders slumping in resignation. And someone find out if humans appreciate ceremonial gifts. Something nice. Not our garbage technology. Glup's mouth parts twisted into what passed for a smile in Plextoid physiology. Already arranged, your magnificence. I took the liberty of having the royal artificers create something special. And I have prepared notes for your apology speech. Speech? You didn't say anything about a speech. It's on page 4219 of the handbook. 28 minutes later, a very different Zax'Vorn emerged from his royal shuttle at the entrance to the Grand Diplomatic Ball. The beige robes of contrition hung from his frame like a tent made of particularly unenthusiastic fabric. His head crest was deliberately deflated, lying flat against his skull in the Plextoid display of humility. And most shocking of all, he had removed 12 of his 13 royal insignia, leaving only the emblem of peaceful intent. I look ridiculous, he muttered. You look appropriately contrite. Glup corrected, straightening the robes. Now remember what we practiced. No sarcasm, no condescension, no comparing any part of anyone to any part of any slug-like creature. This goes against everything I believe in, Zax'Vorn complained. Excellent. That's precisely the point. They approached the entrance, where the same security personnel who had been chasing them hours earlier now stood at attention, plasma rifles at the ready. The lead officer, a tall human with a magnificently groomed facial hair arrangement, stepped forward. Supreme Ruler, we have orders to escort you directly to President Ortiz. I understand, Zax'Vorn said, trying to keep the haughtiness from his voice. Ikomein, peace. The word felt strange in his mouth parts. The security team surrounded them and led them through the grand ballroom, where representatives of dozens of species mingled in a dizzying display of intergalactic diversity. Zax'Vorn couldn't help noticing how easily they all seemed to interact, without the rigid status hierarchies that Plextoid society demanded. It was chaotic, unstructured, and yet strangely compelling. They found President Ortiz in a side chamber, engaged in conversation with the Arcturian ambassador. She turned as they entered, her expression unreadable. Supreme Ruler, this is unexpected. Zax'Vorn took a deep breath, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the robes of contrition. President Ortiz, I have come to. He choked slightly on the next word. God apologize. The room fell silent. Even the Arcturian, whose species was renowned for perpetual motion, went still. I see, President Ortiz said carefully. And what prompted this? Change of heart. Several things, Zax'Vorn admitted, thinking quickly. Your plasma rifles are remarkably effective. But also, I have been made to understand that my behavior was, he glanced at Glup's helpful cue card, inappropriate, disrespectful, and unbecoming of a civilized being. Those are certainly words, President Ortiz noted dryly. But I wonder if you actually understand why your actions were offensive. This wasn't going according to the script. Zax'Vorn shot a panicked look at Glup, who nodded encouragingly. For the first time in centuries, Zax'Vorn found himself at a loss for words. The prepared speech seemed hollow now, in the face of Ortiz's direct question. The truth is, I don't fully understand. My civilization has always valued power and technological advancement above all else. We measure worth by achievements, not feelings. And yet, here you are, wearing what I assume are your culture's equivalent of sackcloth and ashes, Ortiz observed. So clearly you value something more than power, survival. Zax'Vorn flinched. It was uncomfortably accurate. Yes, we need the quantium. But, he added quickly, that doesn't mean I can't learn. I have existed for 328 of your Earth years, and in all that time, no one has ever stood up to me the way you did today. And how did that make you feel? Ortiz asked, in the tone of someone genuinely curious. Furious, indignant, confused. Zax'Vorn paused, then admitted, and perhaps slightly impressed. President Ortiz's expression softened marginally. That's a start, but an apology without understanding is just noise. Then, teach me. Zax'Vorn found himself saying, surprising even himself. Our two species clearly have much to learn from each other. Ortiz raised an eyebrow. Is this a genuine request, or another attempt to secure your quantium supply? Both, Zax'Vorn admitted, deciding that honesty might be the better approach. But I'm beginning to think the knowledge might be as valuable as the mineral. The corners of Ortiz's mouth twitched upward. Now that's the first sensible thing you have said since arriving on Earth. The next 2 hours were the most educational of Zax'Vorn's long life. President Ortiz introduced him to the other Galactic Council members not as a supplicant, but as a leader who was, her exact words, undertaking a journey of diplomatic growth. It was humiliating, yet strangely liberating. The key to human diplomacy, Ortiz explained as they moved through the ballroom, is the understanding that respect doesn't diminish power, it enhances it. When we acknowledge the value of others, they are more inclined to work with us willingly. On my planet, we have a saying, Zax'Vorn replied. The mighty Gorlax doesn't negotiate with its prey. And how's that working out for you? Point taken. The ball was in full swing now. Species that the Plextoids had historically dismissed as insignificant were sharing technological innovations, cultural exchanges, and what appeared to be intoxicating beverages. The Andromedans had created a zero-gravity dance floor in one corner. The Zeta Reticulans were performing what appeared to be some kind of psychic art installation. And the humans, despite being the technological newcomers, moved through it all with casual confidence. I have a question, Zax'Vorn said to Ortiz as they watched the festivities. Your species has a history of conflict among yourselves. How did you overcome that to present a united front to the galaxy? Ortiz laughed. Who says we have overcome it? We still argue constantly. But we have learned something important. Unity doesn't require uniformity. Our strength comes from our diversity of thought. That sounds terribly inefficient. It is. It's also resilient. When one approach fails, we have others ready. When one leader makes a mistake, she gave him a pointed look, others can offer different perspectives. Before Zax'Vorn could respond, a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. A group of Plextoid royal guards burst in, led by Zax'Vorn, Zax'Vorn's ambitious cousin and the commander of his military forces. Supreme Ruler, Zax'Vorn called out, his voice carrying across the ballroom. We received word you were being held against your will. We have come to extract you from these primitives. The room went silent. Security personnel, both human and alien, moved into defensive positions. Zax'Vorn felt the diplomatic progress of the last 2 hours evaporating like morning dew on a Plextoid summer day. Stand down, Commander, he ordered, moving toward his cousin. There's been a misunderstanding. Zax'Vorn's head crest inflated in confusion. But your magnificence, you are wearing the robes of contrition. Clearly these savages have forced you into some kind of humiliating submission ritual. Several nearby humans muttered indignantly. The Arcturian ambassador made a sound like chimes in a windstorm, their version of a disappointed sigh. No one forced me, Zax'Vorn said firmly. I chose to wear these robes as a gesture of respect and a sign that the Plextoid Dominion is open to new diplomatic approaches. Zax'Vorn looked scandalized. But our laws, our traditions, the Supreme Ruler bows to no one. Zax'Vorn glanced at President Ortiz, who was watching the exchange with interest, then back at his cousin. In that moment, he saw clearly the choice before him. Cling to pride and lose everything, or embrace change and create something new. Perhaps, he said slowly, it's time for some new traditions. Zax'Vorn's eyes narrowed. You're not thinking clearly, cousin. The Council of Elders won't stand for this. I won't stand for this." And with that, he drew his ceremonial plasma dagger, a gesture that instantly caused every security officer in the room to raise their weapons. "Drex and AR," Zax'Vorn barked. "Lower your weapon immediately." But his cousin had already committed to his course of action. "The Supreme Ruler has been compromised," he announced to the assembled Plextoid guards. "As next in succession, I hereby invoke the right of emergency leadership." It was a coup. In the middle of the most important diplomatic event in Earth's history, Zax'Vorn was facing an insurrection from his own military commander. "You do not have the authority," Zax'Vorn began, but Drexedar cut him off. "I have the support of the Council of Elders, who agree you have grown weak. The beige robes prove it. No true Plextoid leader would humble himself before lesser species." The guards looked uncertain, glancing between Zax'Vorn and Drexedar as they tried to determine which leader to follow. "If I may," President Ortiz interjected smoothly, stepping forward despite her security team's protests, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about strength and weakness." Drexedar's head swiveled toward her. "Stay out of this, human. This is Plextoid business." "Actually," she replied, unfazed, "since you are attempting a coup in my ballroom, I think I'm entitled to an opinion." "Your opinion means nothing. The Plextoid Dominion follows strength, not diplomacy. We take what we need, including quantium," Ortiz asked mildly. That gave Drexedar pause. "What about it? Earth controls the galaxy's largest quantium reserves. Without our cooperation, your civilization faces collapse within a decade. Your Supreme Ruler understood this and chose a path that ensures your species' survival. Is that weakness? Or is it the ultimate demonstration of strength? The ability to adapt when confronted with new realities." The ballroom was silent as everyone processed her words. Zax'Vorn felt a newfound respect for the human president growing within him. "She's manipulating you," Drexedar insisted, but with less conviction now. "Is she?" Zax'Vorn challenged. "Or is she demonstrating exactly the strategic thinking that has allowed humans to advance so quickly? Think, cousin. What benefits the Dominion more? War with Earth and the entire Galactic Council, or a productive alliance?" Drexedar's head crest began to deflate as uncertainty crept in. "But our traditions will adapt," Zax'Vorn finished firmly, "as they have throughout our history. The first Supreme Ruler traveled between stars in a ship powered by crystals. Today we use quantium drives. Change is our tradition." The tension in the room slowly began to dissipate as Drexedar's resolve visibly weakened. After a moment of consideration, he reluctantly lowered his dagger. "I still think you have gone soft," he muttered. "No, Zax'Vorn Galactic. I have gone smart. There's a difference." He turned to President Ortiz. "I believe we were discussing the terms of Earth joining the Galactic Council and the Plextoid Dominion's role in this new alliance." Ortiz smiled. "Yes, we were. And I think we might be able to find an arrangement that benefits everyone involved." 3 Earth months later, Zax'Vorn stood on the observation deck of the newly renamed flagship diplomatic initiative. The name change had been Gloop's idea, enthusiastically endorsed by the Galactic Council's PR committee, watching as the first shipment of quantium was loaded for transport to Plextoid Prime. "The exchange rate is fair," Gloop reported, reviewing the terms on his datapad. "Earth receives medical technology from the Arcturians, defensive systems from us, and environmental restoration assistance from the Andromedans. In return, we all get regulated access to quantium." "And the cultural exchange program?" Zax'Vorn asked. "The first group of human scholars arrives next month to study Plextoid history, and 20 of our young researchers have already departed for Earth universities." Zax'Vorn nodded, satisfied. The past months had been challenging, requiring him to overcome centuries of ingrained superiority and arrogance. The Council of Elders had initially resisted the changes, but the economic projections had ultimately convinced them. Access to quantium was secured, and the Plextoid Dominion was now an equal member of the Galactic Council, no longer isolated in splendid, precarious superiority. "President Ortiz is arriving tomorrow for the treaty signing ceremony," Gloop reminded him. "The palace has prepared appropriate accommodations with the correct atmospheric mix and gravity settings. And the gift, the artisans have completed it. A perfect replica of Earth's most significant historical monuments in plextoid crystal. President Ortiz will be the first human to possess such an artifact. Zax'Vorn smiled, a gesture he had adopted from human diplomats. Excellent. And have we removed all slugs from the palace gardens? Just to be safe. Every last one, your magnificence. As they turned to leave the observation deck, Zax'Vorn paused for a moment, looking out at the stars. You know, Glup, in all my centuries of rule, I never imagined that the greatest threat to our civilization would come not from superior weapons or technology, but from our own inability to say four simple words. Which words? Your magnificence. I might be wrong. Glup's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, but this time, Zax'Vorn recognized it as a sign of approval rather than exasperation. A most profound observation, Supreme Ruler. Perhaps it should be added to the diplomatic handbook. Page 1. Zax'Vorn agreed. Right after, never compare anyone to any part of Slug. As they walked through the corridors of the flagship, crew members bowed respectfully, but Zax'Vorn noticed something different in their manner. The fear was gone, replaced by genuine respect. It was not unpleasant. I have another diplomatic ball to attend next week, don't I? He asked. Yes, your magnificence. On the Arcturian homeworld, have the robes of contrition cleaned and pressed. Glup stopped in his tracks. But you're not apologizing to anyone. The alliance is secure. Zax'Vorn shrugged his 4 shoulders in a surprisingly human gesture. I have grown fond of beige, and the robes are surprisingly comfortable. He paused, then added with a touch of his old hauteur. But if you tell anyone I said that, I will deny it completely. Some traditions, after all, were worth preserving.